and again, understanding that we need to get general, but it helps to think about what might be. The executive director of the University District Family YMCA, Steve, I hope I've approximated your title. Steve Lewis, you want to raise your hand? Steve Lewis runs the YMCA in the University District, and I had to think hard with Steve about having him come out here or not. The Y, has plans to expand and to update their facilities. The YMCA knows about the TOD site here in Roosevelt, and they've got a home in the University District right now. It's conceivable, but probably not likely, that the University District Y could relocate to Roosevelt. Now, there's a whole lot of big issues that would need to be resolved, and they're one, arguably, a developer, perhaps in partnership with others. I thought it would be useful to have Steve talk with us about what's happening, again with the understanding that this is an idea. It's conditioned upon Sound Transit's process and has to comply with other things. But for those of us that haven't been thinking about TOD for a long time, I'd like us to understand a scenario, a simple scenario. Steve, can you talk with us a little bit from there, or come up here, please? And then we're going to ask you some questions, and we're going to talk about some specifics. Steve, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Steve, and I'm the executive director of the University YMCA. And when I was going back and forth with Jim, we were talking about whether or not it would make sense for me to talk about our project here or not, because I think we were thinking about it as a pretty binary thing in terms of, would we look at building a University YMCA on our current site, or would we look at doing that on perhaps the TOD site, which would fill a number of community needs and fit pretty well with the space, and in a lot of ways align with some of the visions that have been shared. Obviously, there's a number of things that we would need to get through, like Jim said, and a lot of communication that would need to occur about what the ultimate goal was. The more that I listen to the conversation, I listen to the goals that folks are sharing around the TOD or TOC site, the more I think outside the box a little bit more in terms of what the Y can do, both as an institution and as a partner in this work. So when Jim and I initially talked, we talked about our plans for the new University YMCA. And so if you visited the existing University YMCA, how many people have visited the University YMCA? Okay. I know Roger's there every day. So, so we're on 50th and 12th, and it's a building that's been there for about 65 years. And in terms of YMCA's, the YMCA's mission is really around serving all folks, including youth, families, seniors, in our case, the homeless and opportunity youth population. And we've really envisioned for some time developing a full service facility, so a 50,000 square foot facility that would include a lot of things that we're really lacking in our neighborhood right now, like an accessible place for kids of all income levels to be able to swim. We know if you're living in Wedgwood, you've got a 10-year wait and a 962-person waiting list to get through to be able to pay $5,000 for a summer of swimming. We also know that kids have drowned in Green Lake in the last couple of years, particularly kids of color, and we want to answer that. We want to expand our chronic disease prevention work, and knowing that these communities are changing, provide a place for people who have lived here for a long time to continue to have not just an existing, but a better place to stay, and to be a part of a community, and also accommodate some of the new families that are moving in. And so as we've kind of advanced our project, we've looked at developing on our existing site, and we're moving towards that. And so that was a part of Jim and my question as far as coming today, is, if we're moving towards our existing site, is it worth having this conversation? And so, I told Jim we're probably 80% likely to build on our existing site and solidify that in the next probably 5 months. With that said, we also may not. It really depends on some things that are kind of out of our control, and with the city a little bit as well in terms of our zoning and being able to acquire properties. We've always talked about this as kind of as our existing site is the bird in the hand, and this as being something that would be incredible to explore if our bird in the hand flew away, and this having a number of different incredible opportunities to be a place where we might offer a family swimming pool, a community center that's open to all people, a teen drop-in center for for kids after school at Roosevelt who might otherwise be engaging in risky behavior. So a lot of opportunities there. And so that's still on the table as we solidify our plans, but I guess what I want to throw out there is that the Y isn't just a building or not a building. There's a lot of things that we can do in partnership in this new TOD site. And again, I think that I'm here as an example of what might be able to be done. And when I think about what could be done, I'll throw out a couple things that come into my mind. One of those things is affordable childcare and pre-K as part of a building. As we, as a city, invest in light rail as a way of people getting from one place to another, we're assuming that people are going to commute, right? And in doing so, they're going to have to get their kids to a childcare site. So not having that on the light rail, I think, considerably limits our ability to offer this as a commuting solution. A number of other things we could do, whether it's a health and wellness center that's accessible to the community, whether it's a place where we can volunteer and connect young kids with mentors in the community from Roosevelt and work on college preparedness. There's a lot of things that we can do, and I think that working with the community, I would love to be a partner, whether it's, hey, let's go tackle a whole YMCA facility, which I think would be an incredible add to the TOD site, or how can the YMCA play in creating some of the vision that the neighborhood's really looking for, and what resources can we bring to the table and partnering with y'all. So
that's great. Cool. Steve, thanks for coming out. Whether you're our neighbor or not, you're a guy with a lot of good ideas. So at this point, I'd like to take some comments and some questions. We're going to capture your issues, your interests. We've got a videotape rolling. We've got some papers on the wall where we can do this. I mean, how about some reactions from people and priorities? Mary Ann, I see you ready to speak.
Well, I wanted to speak to an idea I have for
Please.
Okay.
Come on up if you like. And we've got, 15, 20 minutes for this conversation, and it'll continue outside the room. Mary Ann Scruggs, my neighbor.
Hi, I want to spin a creative vision. I am a caregiver and care manager for old people. What I would like to see in that space be is a residence for older people, mostly independent living, but also including memory care and assisted living. In the bottom of it, I would like to see a nursery. And this is very cutting edge now to have a nursery connected to an old people center with a playground that people can sit outside and interact with the kids, or have programs that interact with the kids. I'd also like to see, in part of that building, a day center for people who have Alzheimer's or other things that make them not be able to safely be at home in the daytime, even though in the evenings they have family who can look after them. Currently, that kind of care in your home is $25 to $30 an hour. How many of you guys can afford that when you're needing it? What I would like to see is the University of Washington working in that child care unit, having cutting edge kind of interaction with that kind of older people and young children, and also having University of Washington social work department involved with the daycare center. There are hardly any adult geriatric daycare centers for people with dementia in this city. Hardly any. They all have huge waiting lists. And the rest of it having a number of units for people living independently. This wonderful idea has hardly any need for parking. Aegis, which I wouldn't suggest being a developer, on Madison and 23rd has about 8 parking spaces. This would not pull parking in, whereas something like the Y would for its older population. The wonderful thing about this for older people is they can get to their doctor's appointments. They're safe in the community. They wouldn't be socially isolated, which is one of the worst problems for older people. And it would counter all the people who are all the 30-somethings that are going to come and live in these apartments. It would be an older population, and it would be a kinder place. So that's my vision.
Marianne, thank you. Certainly, that's a population. I mean, I plan to get old, and I'd like to be here, and I've often wondered where I'm going to end up. How about some other ideas? You know, from your seat, or if you're inclined, you can talk to the group from up here. We're trying to draw out, you know, general priority. I think that's a great example of a general priority. You know, it's an issue that can be addressed at a high level. I mean, from Sound Transit, I mean, this is the type of thing, at least as a stepping stone. Who's got some other thoughts? Nancy?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is exactly for that site, but in the neighborhood, we have some wonderful small businesses that are independently owned, that aren't necessarily high profit margin businesses, and I'd really like to keep them. So that's a priority. Somehow figuring out how to keep those in our neighborhood.
So, I mean, conceivably, a provision of a development plan would ask developers to provide for the small independent businesses and not have rents that only your Subway and Verizon store could afford. Peter, what's your thought?
About the Green Street, 66th Street. I'm right, I think, in saying that passengers won't be directly entering or leaving on 66th.
To the light rail station. Actually, I believe the drop-off, Kristen Hoffman from Sound Transit can confirm, is it not here at 66th and 12th?
Yeah, so we have two drop-off spots on the north side of 66th, right in front of the station frontage, and on the south side. But as far as the access into the station,
Yes.
The entrance is on 65th and 67th.
Okay, thank you. So it's not going to generate a huge amount of people just going down the hole on 66th.
I mean, if someone gets dropped off.
Going down into the tunnel.
Exactly, they do have to.
So I'd really like to really emphasize that idea of that being a lingering street, which I think fits in with what you were saying. I think it fits in with what you were saying, Marianne. Where when that site is being developed, if it ends up being a site where there is some retail outlet, I hope there are considerations given to the type of smaller businesses that want to rent smaller places that will offer services that will encourage people to linger in that street, and such that the sidewalk is wide enough so that in the nicer months that it's a place where people will sit around, and cafes may put chairs and tables out, and it would just be a rich, slow-moving alternative to the arterial 65th. With the best will in the world, I find it challenging to sit and have a cup of coffee on 65th.
Yeah. Peter, I think that's great. I'm right there with you. I want to acknowledge that in the design of the station structure, and we've got a slide, but I don't want to take the time to find it, Sound Transit has directed their architect to create little spaces here. I asked Sound Transit, a long time ago to embrace the Green Street, and I think they've done it. So the south end of the North Station, not only does it have bicycle infrastructure, but there's at least some seating area. Am I right, Ron and Kristen?
Yeah, so it steps down, so there's seating kind of on top of the plaza, and the north side of 66th is the larger of the two plazas, with the smaller plaza being on the south side of 66th. So there's seating kind of up top, and then the way the stairs are designed to kind of step down, or nice wide kind of sit and linger. And then you saw in Thatcher's one of the images that he showed of the what we're calling the Art Plaza, which is right there where Jim's showing. There's a kind of an L-shaped bench that's tucked up against the building, so more kind of the quiet.
There's a 45-foot statue going in there. I mean, it's a pretty impressive piece of art. So we've got in the station design itself the beginnings of a place. The urban planners use this term, which I rather like, place making. I mean, it kind of gets at the deliberate intent to make a place where you want to be. So pieces of the station design accommodate that. But Peter, I think what you're saying, what I want to see is the TOD project here. I want it to very deliberately engage the Green Street. Now, the Dwell Roosevelt, vehicle entrance is here, and that's always going to be a case. There's going to be cars coming and going on 66th. But what can we do? What can we ask for here to engage this whole space? Again, remembering that the high school's here, the high school's not going anywhere. This is a place to be made, 12th and 66th, but I think all of this and the extended Green Street down to Whedon. Remember, we've got the Whedon Place project where SDOT is our partner. There's going to be public art here, and then Green Lake is off to Whedon. So some people call this the Olympic Promenade. If you stand here in an early summer evening, the mountains are visible. I mean, again, I implore you to dream about what 66 should be and how that informs what the TOD should be. Gina, what's your thought?
So I have a question to that, and I don't know SDOT needs to answer this or what, but if that's a Green Street there, does that mean parking on that street is limited, or there's no parking? Or can we ask for there to be no parking, or,
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I might go to I don't know, I think there's some, and in front of the station, there's some drop-off parking. As the street develops, whether there's on-street parking or not is, I think, probably an open question, frankly. It kind of probably depends a lot on the adjacent land uses. I think the first speaker also made a really good point that think about the use that goes in here and the type of parking supply it might need or not. Because, as Jim mentioned, the use across the street is accessing to and from 66th. The type of development and the amount of parking will influence what that street feels like in terms of how many cars are going in and out throughout the day and where they're loading, right? Are they going to load on 66 or are going to load on the adjoining street? So that's just also something to think about. So, but I think that's, I think on-street parking is something that is very flexible, I think, depending on really the demand and the need. So, sorry.
Real quick, along those same lines, what sort of accommodations are made for something like food trucks? Is there typically some sort of designated spot for such things?
There's often not a designated spot, but it's a good question. We actually do allow food trucks in the public right-of-way. Most other cities don't. They have to be in sort of on private property. So we do allow food trucks in the public right-of-way. It's typically through what's called a street use permit. So generally they're not sort of pre-planned, but they could be allowed, again, depending on the circumstances.
Are we, are we restricting car access to that street to local access by one-waying it or narrowing it, or, I mean, can we prevent that just being cut?
Well, I think it's a really good question. I mean, 66 is, I don't believe, an arterial street and not intended to be an arterial street. It's a one-way street. I think a lot of that gets to, is it two-way now? Okay.
Well, it's
Yeah.
it's two-way from 12th to the west. It's one-way from.
Right, okay, that's, yeah. So I think, again, a lot of that gets to the way, sort of design issues. So I think the intent, if you look at this part of the streetscape concept plan, was to really sort of make this intersection feel really quiet, right? By bringing curb bulbs out, by kind of slowing traffic down, by having, you can see there's crosswalks on every street. I know that's been an issue that we've been working with Sound Transit on in terms of how wide does that really need to be, and trying to, narrow it to the extent possible, but still allowing turning movements to some extent. So I think as I look at this, I think clearly and a lot of you are probably more familiar with this than I am because you worked on it. But I think to Jim's point and others, the intent was really for this to be a quiet, pedestrian-oriented, street with opportunities for public plazas and other things for people to linger.
Roger, I saw your hand in the back.
Sound Transit is here, I just wanted to ask a couple questions so we all know what the answers are, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's curious. On 12th Avenue, is that a ventilation vent that you're building? And is it the same thing on 62nd?
I guess I'm not sure on 12th, where are you?
You're
12th
digging a
and-
hole there, you know? You're putting in 12th.
12th and what?
12th and 50.
So the station, of course,
Why? No, but just south of Ravenna Boulevard.
Oh.
At 12th and, okay, so he's,
Kristen Hoffman is with Sound Transit. She can explain, I think that's the cross bores or,
The other question is, when is the arc going to go up on the wall? Walls are going to be strapped to the door now. When's it coming?
Okay, the first one is easier to answer.
you need your presentation?
No, I can use. So your question about what we're doing at 12th and 57th, which is, hold on, let me just skip my bearings here. 60. Where's Ravenna? Oh, here. So basically, is this the pointer? Yep. Okay, so here's the station site. So down at 12th and just south of Ravenna, we have cross passages. So cross passages, by law, we have to have them every 800 or so feet. And what cross passages are, we're boring two twin-bored tunnels parallel to each other. And so every 800 feet or so, we have to have a tunnel that connects those two. So if there was an emergency in one tunnel, then people could get over into the other tunnel and be safe. So what you're seeing away from our site, our construction site, is we're starting to construct those cross passages. So that's what all of the work is.
And art, temporary art is what you're talking about on the green wall?
So the temporary art, that's a good question. So that's in the hands of our art department, and it's supposed to be coming. Unfortunately, I don't have a timeline as to when they plan on getting that up, but I can follow up and let Jim know, and he can send out some information.
Thanks, Kristen. I want to stay focused on the TOD issue if we can, especially this Site B, because again, the objective is to begin to provide some guidance, some position from the community about your preferences for the things that would happen there. Sir in the back, and then Jorgen.
My name is Chris Pasco, and I had actually 3 ideas that I think would, well, the first 3 ideas mentioned, I think there would be a really great way to incorporate all 3 of those by, basically this kind of came out of an RNA meeting about 6 months ago. We were talking about trying to make Roosevelt not become just a bedroom community and having it be activated, all day long. And I think a great way to do that would be to kind of think of that site as different layers and, putting things at the street level, such as, coffee shops, small local businesses, things like that. And then on the next level, you could do things that are like, computer repair shops or, senior care, doctor's offices. It could be co-working space. It could be traditional office space. That would allow the restaurants and businesses in the area to stay busy during the day, hair salons, things like that. People working in the neighborhood in this new space and perhaps the second and third level of that site would then come down for lunch and activate the whole neighborhood during the day. And then I actually was really excited by the senior care component. And so then, since this is I think it's a NC 85.
Correct. That's the zoning. Could be as much as 8 stories.
So then the upper floors could be for the senior care, and you'd have this whole integrated plan of activating the street level with small businesses, having a couple levels of office during the day, and then a top level of the senior care. And the doctor office component on the second or third level could be geared towards senior care, for example. And I think that would be a great way to kind of incorporate a lot of these things that we're talking about and having them all work on one site. And there's a lot of examples around the city, or around the country rather, of where this is happening, when we're putting, office on the second level. What I think would be unfortunate is not, all of these new apartment buildings going up don't really have an office component. And if we don't try to think of this site as a great model to incorporate that, I think this neighborhood can be developed without that aspect. And then, basically from 9:30 in the morning until 5 o'clock at night, you kind of have this dead zone. And I think that would be really important.
Those are good inputs, and I'm hearing other neighbors of mine talk about office space. Why do we need to just have more? Housing's important, to be sure, but having a more diverse type of functionality all day, it's intriguing. Something else, and then we'll move on. Yeah.
Well, the last thing is, I actually know of a lot of businesses that are being displaced in the neighborhood that, are kind of clamoring for office space right now. And they may not be the type of businesses that need to be in retail spaces on the ground floor. They could be a place like, I know of a computer repair place that is looking for space, and they could easily be on the second or third floor of a building and be just fine.
Okay.
And so, nice to keep them in the neighborhood.
That's great. That's the type of input we're looking for. It's generalized. Jorgen, and then to Marianne.
I want to take up the issue Mr. O'Neill raised about connectivity with Metro. We have Sound Transit building right up to the property line on the sidewalk. We have Metro talking about having more bus service on 65th, like they're doing for the Husky Stadium. We have the city planning to put a cycle track on Roosevelt right next to the sidewalks. Now, the only way these three can accommodate their existing plans is to have in-lane bus stops and have all the traffic back up while the passengers get on and off the bus. And that will make a mess for businesses. I think the neighborhood association has to tell the transit agencies to get together and plan together and not to have that kind of blockage. Otherwise, you're going to have like the university station by the Husky Stadium, where the passengers have to get off a quarter of a mile away to get to Husky Stadium and get to Metro.
Okay, some coordination is clear. These agencies are talking, of course, but you mentioned some specific concerns that I think warrant more discussion. I mean, I know you're a student of these topics, Jorgen, and we need to pursue them further. I want to stay as focused as we can on the TOD sites themselves. We're going to start to wrap up here. We're just about out of time, but this is a great opportunity to put your ideas forward. Marianne, something else?
The idea that I had was residential care plus a daycare center plus an adult daycare center. But whatever the thing that goes in there is, I hope we could find a principle that is, it will not bring any cars into that space. Because as much as we like to say that these people aren't going to take their cars there, they are. And if you had a daycare center that was for local people, they don't have to drive their kids somewhere. That's a big bunch of people that drive, people with kids. And older people drive. So also the other thing I didn't say about that is the connection with Roosevelt in a residence for old people. Could do all their community service hours, could do lunchtime concerts, all that sort of stuff. So, and the school, Roosevelt School.
Yeah.
And I don't know, to me it just works because it doesn't bring cars in. It totally connects with the UW, it totally connects with Roosevelt High School, and it brings older people out into our community.
I think it's well to consider the additional traffic impacts of anything that happens on the TOD site. Because I have the microphone, I'll share one of my pet ideas that's not strange to Sound Transit, but the B site is the big one, but here's the A site, and C is up here. This is the smallest site, and Sound Transit's got a lot of work to do to decide how viable it is, but I think it's possible available, and this is not something that Sound Transit has asserted, but I'm dreaming of this space to remain open and not developed into a building. It might be available for ongoing operational support by Sound Transit for the operations of the station. I mean, there will be Sound Transit vehicles and support operations that take place. I've seen an interesting open public space in downtown Helena, Montana, which is available. It's a stage, and people program things. There's live performances through the Parks Department. An open space like this that had periodic access to the community could be used for outdoor movies. It could be used for a variety of things. I know the new theater director at the high school. I haven't talked to Ben yet, but it'd be cool if the high school kids had the opportunity to actually perform in the neighborhood. An open space that was, quote, shared with Sound Transit could afford a variety of interesting opportunities for the community. So, the arts and culture issue is important to me, and I think some of you as well. Let's just see if there's anything else in the room in the way of input, and then we're going to be done for the day. To my speakers, do you have any other comments to make? I mean, based on what we've heard, you each made great presentations, and I think we know where you're at, but are you good for now? All right. Anything else from Sound Transit? Thank